Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Sliding Into My DMs, part of the D4 network, where we talk about D&D news, we talk about D&D rulings, and basically just chat, me, Colby, with my DMs about, how to ensure that everybody at your table is having a lot of fun in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So with me, as always, we have Cory, we have Preston, and we've got Mr. Rogers, the Blackthorn, Dallin.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome back.
How come nobody else has like all these cool titles? What? Like that seems a little. Yeah.
I have one, but it's self-made.
That's right. And speaking, Cory, you got a shave and a haircut. You're looking sharp.
I did. Yeah. Actually, I didn't get a haircut. It's just combed today. Instead of just being like, sprayed down as much as it can, I actually decided to do some styling on it.
Looking good.
And may I just say, to get this out of the way, Thornlock, Tales of Veneria, Session 4, let's see what else. We got the Pam Lock. Let's do your latest episode where you talk about Nova builds. I'm just getting all the cards consumed here at the beginning.
They take like a few seconds to at least. Yes, Tales of Veneria episode 4 just came out yesterday.
I'm not gonna lie. I feel like that's where we really hit our stride.
I think so too. I think so too. If you've been putting off not watching for whatever reason, the audio's been getting better. I feel like the show has been great since episode 1, but I feel like 4 was our best so far. So it's a good chance to jump in, and there are nice handy 10 to 15 minute recaps at the beginning of each after the first episode, the beginning of 2 and 3 and 4, to catch you up on what you missed if you don't have time to watch all of the other ones, if you want to just jump into 4. So anyway,
they're great.
They're earmarked, easy to find.
That's right. As always, I want to talk with you guys about a quick ruling question that's been bugging me for quite some time now, actually, and then a larger conversation, which I'll introduce later. So as far as the quick ruling goes today, I want to talk about Conjure Animals and Conjure Woodland Beings and similar type spells. For those who have been watching my channel for a while, you probably can tell that I don't like these spells.
DMs don't either.
Yeah. Are they a bit too chaotic for you?
I don't like these spells. It's like the druid version of wild magic sorcerer. It's like they bug me, and I think the one thing that bothers me about them is what I want to address in the quick ruling. So let's get into it. Here's my question: if I am to cast the Conjure Animals spell or Conjure Woodland Beings, how do you as a DM determine what creatures are conjured? Is it do you let the player choose? Do you as the DM choose? Is it sort of a hybrid where the player chooses like the number of creatures and you choose the creature type? And why? And I want to talk about kind of your interpretation of rules as written, and then maybe how you would rule it at your table, as we usually do. But for reference, let me read what the spell description says. So
nobody said there'd be reading.
That's what I'm reading. You just listen.
Nobody said there'd be listening.
You summon, so this is from Fey creatures. They're basically similar wordings. You summon Fey creatures that appear in unoccupied spaces that you can see within range. Choose one of the following options for what appears. So choose, it's telling you, the player, to choose 1 Fey creature of challenge rating 2 or lower, 2 Fey creatures of challenge rating 1 or lower, 4 Fey creatures of challenge rating 1/2 or lower, 8 Fey creatures of challenge rating 1/4 or lower. The GM has the creature statistics. You can see some sample creatures below. And then at higher levels, you get to double the number. From Conjure Animals, twice as many as a 5th level spot at a 5th level spell slot, 3 times as many as 7th level, 4 times as many as a 9th. So potentially we're talking, if somebody if somebody said, I want challenge rating 1/4 or lower, you're potentially at a 9th level spell looking at 32 creatures, right? Okay, so who gets to decide what type of creature is summoned? Does the player get to choose everything? Do they just choose like the challenge rating and then the dungeon master picks the creatures, et cetera, et cetera? So let's address that first. What's your take?
Sure. So rules as written, it says that you choose one of the options below. And then it says you choose a number of creatures of a specific challenge rating or lower.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, that is your choice.
Mm-hmm.
And the DM then decides from there what shows up.
Okay.
That gives you some examples in the book, specifically because it's trying to show you what your options might be. But and this is, as far as the reading that I've done, the intention of the rules is that the dungeon master determines what shows up. You just pick how many and what challenge rating.
Right. So you would then say, okay, I want 8 beasts of challenge rating 1/4 or lower. And then you as the DM would say, okay, you pull out your monster manual, you look through, beasts that are a 1/4 challenge rating or lower, or you pull it up on D&D Beyond or whatever, and you say, okay, here's all my different options. I mean, yeah, the spell does list some, but it's not all of them, right? Axe beak, boar, constrictor snake, draft horse, elk, giant badger, giant bat, giant centipede, giant frog, blah, 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 right? Okay.
I hear giant frogs have great swallow action, so I think that.
I think that's the subterranean lizard.
Well, the giant frogs have it too. Okay, Preston, Mr. Rogers, do you guys concur? Do you read that differently?
I think this rule or this spell is written really poorly.
Yeah.
Because the way that it's written, not the way that it's intended, I'm sure, but the way that it's written, or at least the way that I read it, is like the player chooses everything, and then for some reason the GM has the stats, even though the player chose everything. That's how it's written. As it's intended, I think it's what Cory says, where no, you pick the challenge rating and the number associated with that, and then the GM picks the monster or the beast.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty here in that case, because what we're told is you summon face spirits. Again, I'm reading from Conjure Animals now. You summon face spirits that take the form of beasts, appear in occupied spaces you can see within range. Choose one of the following options for what appears: beast of challenge rating, number, blah blah blah. Each beast is also considered fate, and it disappears when it drops to 0 hit points. The summoned creatures are friendly to you, blah 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 blah. Later, the GM has the creature's statistics, but it doesn't say. The GM chooses what shows up, but it
doesn't say the player does either.
It says
that the thing though is I feel like the spell's useless if you as the player don't get to choose what comes out. Because what if you're like, okay, I want 32, fourth challenge rating, whatever, and the GM's like, okay, you have 32 seahorses.
I think
the reason
that's there though.
Yeah,
I think the reason that's there though is to prevent, like in the case of the druid saying, I want to summon a bunch of pixies who are going to then cast polymorph on my players and using that,
or a swarm of raptors.
And that's based on the 2015 ruling in Sage Advice from JC when he says, Jeremy Crawford, making sure that's clear.
We're on slang name basis. We're on nickname
I don't want
basis
to be
with good old JC.
and like that was kind of his, to go again, reiterating what Cory said. And I've had that in my games, and I allow it every so often to be like, hey, if you can give me a thematic choice, like let's say you were raised by a pack of wolves and you want to be able to summon those using woodland creatures or something, like sure, yeah, I'll let you choose that every time, and that's not a problem. Or if it's, if you're in the bottom of the ocean as a DM, I don't want to be a douche and be like, okay, you summon a horse and it drowns. Like
I get so many comments in my videos of people, in fact, just on the video that I posted this week. Yep, there you go, Cory. That compares like sort of damage spells, right? Burst damage spells. And I talked about animated objects, but I didn't talk about Conjure Animals. And I had a couple of people that were like, what the heck, like 8 elk is way better than like 8 tiny animated objects. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know that you're gonna get 8 elk. Now maybe at your table
That's true.
You might get 8.
you
true.
might get 8 elk, but at my table I might get 8 frogs.
It all depends on the
and not
depends on
giant
the
frogs.
DM.
I'm talking frogs because
Frogs.
it says
Or
you
lower.
choose or lower 8 beasts of challenge rating 1/4 or lower, and so it's like I don't know if you're gonna have a DM that's just gonna mess with you. You know what I mean? And be like,
Here's 32
Eh.
normal sized spiders.
yeah, it's like
Enjoy.
They all bite at the same time. It's very
okay. I have 16 kitties. Or just, I mean,
This-
what?
yeah.
Like, I guess they could take the help action, but
it does make it
rule-
chaotic.
This spell thinks that you and your DM are best friends and are always going to be very nice to each other, and no one's going to abuse one side of the.
You know what? No one
Right.
brought me snacks today. You're getting just you're getting spiders. You're getting
But,
a
like,
fleet.
The
Sand
reality of it is just that's not going to work like that. Like
Yeah.
someone's going to take advantage of somebody. So I just think it's a bad spell. I really don't like it, to be honest.
Yeah.
so
Preston, you said snacks and spiders too close together. It conjured a weird image in my mind.
Spiders.
Snack spiders.
Conjure
snacks.
woodland image.
So okay, so here's the assumption that I'm gonna make. I'm gonna assume that at 90% of tables, when somebody casts this spell, if they say I want 8 beasts of challenge rating 1/4 or lower, then the DM will say, fine, I'm gonna pick the creature, but I'm gonna pick a 1/4 creature. I'm not gonna give you a 0 challenge rating creature because now I'm just a dick. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I just made you waste a spell slot just out of
Right.
spite or whatever.
Mm.
Do you guys agree with me there? Do you is that how you would rule it? Do you think most DMs would rule it, or would you do something differently?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think of any friend of mine that would be a cruel DM and give you something completely useless, and I can't think of one because like I can think of ways to abuse this on the DM side where somebody goes, oh, I want to summon 1 creature of challenge rating 2 or lower, and then you're like, okay, 2 or lower, eh? All right, well, here's a challenge
0.
rating 0, and you get
Yeah.
one of them kind of thing. That's ridiculous. No DM would ever
Yeah.
play that way, and no player would ever continue to play with a DM that way, or they shouldn't.
No good DM, because if
Yeah.
the fact that there's complaints about it tells me there's something
True.
up there.
Yeah. I think in my head, there's a few factors that need to go into this spell kind of on the back end, right? And those factors are location.
Yeah.
Like where you are
In the desert?
determines, yeah, if you're in the desert, it's not conceivable to summon a
Octopus.
bunch of octopuses, or when you're under the ocean, it's not great to summon camels. Like, don't do that. Another thing is the character who is summoning them. If the character is supposed to be like this plague druid or this like insectoid druid, giving them a bunch of wolves kind of doesn't really fit very well, but giving them spiders or snakes, kind of thing, would be much more thematically
It's
appropriate.
like limiting the scope.
And I would always give the players an idea, or ask them what would you like to have summoned here, and see what they say, because their intention with the spell matters. And any good book about magical spells always tells you that intention matters when you're casting the spell, right? Like if you intend to cast the spell and summon a bunch of antelope, then you get a lion, like either something went completely wrong with that spell and you're thinking predatory instead of prey,
You got the verbal component wrong.
yeah.
You just
or you're getting
you
something
flubbed
wrong.
the word.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and putting my weeb glasses on, it reminds me of the summoning process with if you've ever seen the show Naruto. And there's occasions until he had it perfected, he'd try and summon something, and sometimes he'd get a little tiny toad and it was like completely useless. And then other times he'd get the big giant one and he couldn't handle it because it was too big. Or, but at least it was in the thematic realm of kind of what Cory's saying is don't, as a DM, if we're giving DMs what do you call it, advice, I guess, don't be a dick. And if you're being a player, don't abuse it so your DM doesn't feel like they need to be a dick. So
Yeah. Like the whole pixie thing is a prime example, and it's like conjure woodland beings. It's like, okay, what do you want to do with it? And then you tell the DM, if I get told that in a game, I'm gonna go, it works this time.
Yes,
once.
exactly. I'll let it happen once.
It works this time, but in the future, we need to have a discussion about that.
For the uninitiated, pixies have access to the polymorph spell, and so theoretically, the theory is
independent
you use this,
concentration.
you summon 8 pixies, or heaven forbid 16 or 24 or 32, and now they can all cast polymorph, and so they turn all of your enemies into a goldfish, or they turn you and your friends all into T-Rexes, and and hilarity and insanity ensues, and it's like,
which is great one time,
maybe once,
right?
But not every fight.
That's fantastic one time, and that's the whole thing about and that's one thing that people like to attach to when it comes to power gamers, min-maxers, optimizers, if you will, is like, oh, you're just doing the same thing over and over and abusing the system. But it's not really the same case with casting darkness on your weapon and moving as a globe of darkness is completely different from creating 8 pixies every time and turning yourself into T-Rexes.
Yeah. Sure.
And your party's going to get, the rest of your other players are going to get bored of that too.
I'm tired of being a T-Rex.
Well, and if you're a DM and you found yourself in the realm of, okay, I said you can do it all the time, either one, you have to have that discussion and say, hey, we need to pare this back, or two, start casting fireball right in the middle of them. Like if they're going to keep doing it, like you got to get them to figure out, oh crap, like this isn't the end all be all. Like I need to adjust my step. Not
32 elk don't do anything against a Baylor. Or a Tarask or a Bahir, they're gonna be destroyed. During our final fight with T-Mat, you guys summoned a bunch of stuff, and I thought I was giving you a little bit of a bonus because I was giving you a lower CR creature to summon, but more of them for more hits and everything. But it didn't do anything.
It used a spell slot.
We had the Horn of Valir, right?
Horn of Valhalla.
Yeah,
Horn of Valhalla. We talked about that last time.
But it was a knockoff version.
It summoned a bunch of creatures that all died. And
we got to talk to Sarge about that. I mean,
that's an oversight.
And of course, you run into the same problem with this spell as I talked about in my Necromancer episode, Necromancer and Oathbreaker, I should say, episode. Where take a drink. It's like, okay, like this really has the potential to slow the game down to a crawl, right? And not to mention, like, there might not be enough room in the battlefield for 32 elk, which I believe are large creatures, if I'm not mistaken. It's just like there's obviously some logistical issues that come up as well, and so that's
goes
why
hand in hand with location, right? Yeah. If as a GM somebody's like, I want to summon 32 elk, and I'm like, this is a 20-foot room on each side. No, you cannot summon 20 elk in here.
Or just let them do it and take like 40 force damage.
Bludgeoning damages. They're all kicking and freaking out.
Yeah.
Stampeding.
So for my viewers, just know going forward, until I do a Shepherd Druid build, which will happen one day, I'm probably not going to use this spell, just because, again, like, I don't know how your DM's going to rule it. I don't know what kind of creature is going to get summoned. I'm assuming, like we've talked about, most of them will be willing to say, okay, fine, you choose the challenge rating and number. I'm not going to go lower than the challenge rating you pick, but I am going to decide what gets summoned. And then trying to work that into a damage report is very difficult. And I suppose I could try and find an average for beasts, or like take the weakest of them.
Let's put some metrics behind it. So the next time we do a 10K subscriber bump or something, Cory, will you commit to allowing Colby to choose his woodland creatures or face? Because that will get it done.
I don't want to.
Because that'll get the build out there. So
interesting. I will consider this. I like this idea.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Rogers? Anything to add? Anything that we're missing?
I think we've covered it thoroughly.
Okay, great. Well, that's our treatise on Conjure Animals and Woodland Beings. All right, let's jump into the larger conversation. And we're back. Welcome.
Sorry, there were 32 elk that suddenly appeared in my room. I had to take care of them.
Sorry, ooh. I cast that, but I thought you as the DM would pick.
You should have picked 32 spiders. Actually, I'd rather have elk.
Arachnophobia.
Yeah. I'm going to get a lot of grief from some of my viewers about this one today, I think. Why do you hate druids so much? Why do you hate this?
I love druids. They're broken. They're broken as all hell, but I love them.
All right, let's talk about our longer topic today, which is
Speaking of broken.
Yes, speaking of broken, good segue. Is a homebrew subclass. So, okay, for those who have been watching Tales of Veneria, you know, I am guessing, that Cory has homebrewed a rogue subclass for Preston to play. His name is Victor, but I lovingly refer to him as Victor.
Turn his mic off. Turn his mic off.
And it's never gonna change.
Oh boy.
Anyway, it's so it's a rogue subclass known as the Knife Dancer, and we wanted to talk about it with you guys today, both to sort of just kind of clue you in a little bit on what this character subclass can do.
I assume we're going to link it in the description.
Yeah. It'll be in the video description, a link to so that you can see it and potentially follow along if you want to, or read it afterwards. And so I kind of wanted to have a conversation with Cory and Preston and even Dallin and just kind of get everybody's take on it a little bit, but have Cory explain a little bit sort of high level what it is, what the inspiration for it was, like how he envisions this character kind of working in game, I suppose, and get into a little bit of the detail, a little bit of the nitty gritty, maybe talk about if it's balanced or not and how we might come to that conclusion. But then also maybe have just a brief conversation about, maybe tips and tricks on coming up with homebrew stuff, particularly classes or subclasses, and how you go about doing it, how you try to balance stuff like that. So
awesome tools for making the one like in the description below. Make it look like a real one.
Yes. Oh yeah, exactly. Because it looks like it's straight out of a D&D book, the way that Cory's got it all written up here.
I mean, it's got more spelling errors than you would normally see in a D&D.
Sure. So there's some grammatical errors. It's
only version 1.
The writing professor in me I wanted to get out my red pen. My screen actually has a bunch of like red marker on it now that I have to go find a way to clean off.
You're welcome.
But anyway, yes, Cory, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction here to the Knife Dancer, because so far the only intro that people have had is just kind of seeing what Preston's character has been able to do in game. And so give us a little overview here of how this character works and what inspired you, what you were trying to create when you created it.
Sure. So the concept actually happened when I was writing up the first session, and I came up with the group that you guys were going to fight, this kind of rival group. And when I came up with Yinny, the halfling, I was like, I want her to be a blade thrower. And one of the books that I love is from Drew Hayes, and it's called NPCs, it's NPCs, not the NPC. That's a different book. I read a lot of books that are titled like that. But basically in that they actually have a gnome who is a paladin, but he's not really good with melee weapons. He uses knives, and they return to him via this magical belt that he has, right? He whistles and they magically appear holstered again at his sides. And I was like, I really love the concept of this, and I love the idea of a small creature being able to wield these daggers and having them like bounce off, Captain America shield style. A bunch of different factors went into it, and so I came up with the idea of knife dancing as a sort of unique thing in the world that people can tap into. And of course, I immediately started thinking about my players and started thinking, like, would one of them like to play something within my world? And I actually went and started looking, and I was like, there's only one person who hasn't picked their character path yet, and it's Preston. Yes. And I'm like, if I was ever going to make a homebrew class, Preston would be the character or the player that I would want to play that to test it out. Because you're definitely not the type that would just try and like break it. Like, we'll leave that to the comment section.
Unless it's really funny.
You definitely would not want to put this character in my hands in beta mode. Because the first time I read it, I was just like, oh my gosh. It's like, if I took this fighting style and that fighting style, and then I used it with this spell, and I'm just like,
I sent Preston the information. I said, there's 3 different types of knife dancers. You got your artistic ones, you've got your battle dancers, which are these like ones that end up wearing like cloaks of knives, made out of knives kind of thing. And then you've got your mystic dancers, which focus more on spells. And he went, I love the battle dancer, but I also want spells. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll roll them all into one and you can kind of pick and choose how you want. So
thematic spells, not just like any spells, but like ones specific to this.
And that brings up the first point that I want, the first tip, learning how to like do this and create this homebrew and what not to do, is if you're okay with somebody going all the way through this as if they were multi-classing into multiple classes, that's fine. Otherwise, you need to limit what your scope is, because giving somebody martial abilities and spellcasting abilities, like that's multi-classing right there, and you're giving it to them just by going down this one path. So you have to be okay with that. Sorry, I got sidetracked, but that's I think that's a great tip, just as if you're thinking about home brewing, is make sure you have kind of a narrow scope, because I kind of went wild with this.
Give us a little description, maybe like sort of a high level overview of like the abilities that you pick up at 3rd, 9th, 13th, and 17th levels, which is what all rogues get for subclass.
Yep, I made sure to template it off of a rogue subclass. So those are the levels that any other subclass would get. Yeah.
Tip number 2: if you're going to make a subclass of something, like
follow existing,
existing sort of protocol for balance.
Avoid as much as you can. Avoid going and saying, "Hey, I'm going to use this monk template within the rogue archetype," because the different things will, or like in the fighter and the barbarian, they're just balanced differently.
But the basic idea is that the knife dancer psychically or magically bonds themselves to blades as if they were attuning to them, but without attunement. And then those blades become extensions of themselves that can kind of psychically, telekinetically float around them, flow to different areas, return to them, that sort of thing. So it kind of creates this way for you to, the whole idea is that you're doing this elegant dance with these blades so that they are constantly in motion, constantly going to places, doing tricks, coming back to you, that sort of thing. So I gave a little bit of a twofold at 3rd level, which really you should only do one thing at 3rd level, but I couldn't resist. And that is that as a bonus action, you can throw out a number of knives equal to, I think it's just your proficiency bonus. So basically at level 3, I think your proficiency bonus is 2 or 3?
2.
2? Okay, Preston, you've been doing this wrong. You've been throwing out 3.
Cheater.
maybe
he wouldn't
maybe I have
it.
to change. Yep, you're right. Subclass revoked. But anyway, so the idea is that you spend a bonus action on your turn setting these blades up in an unoccupied square, and then your regular melee attack also sets that blade up in that square. Or in the square of the creature that it hit. And then on your subsequent turns, you can use a bonus action to either throw out more or return up to a number of your proficiency bonus blades to you, dealing damage in sort of a line. So the idea is that you're going to be able to do, if you can get a bunch of creatures lined up in a straight line, you can do multiple instances of a D4 damage, which is great for your DPR, but you're also spending a turn throwing out these knives and setting it up.
You forego an entire turn to set up.
But isn't it just a bonus action to throw them out?
Yeah, so it's a bonus action to throw them out, but you don't do any damage when you throw them.
Right.
With the bonus action, only when you're bringing them back to you.
Unless in the case that you walk into a room, you set up a trap, and then they come into it, and then you pull it. That's
exactly.
So for clarity, I could, let's say it's me and one other bad guy, and we're directly facing off against each other. On my turn, I bonus action throw, let's say I'm 3rd level, so I throw 2 daggers behind him, one right behind him, one 2 squares behind him, because they're both unoccupied, right?
Yep.
And then as an action, I make an attack with a dagger, and I do D4 plus my dexterity bonus plus my sneak attack damage if I can get sneak attack. And then on my next turn, I attack him again for the same effect, but then as my bonus action, I call the blades back to me. And as long as they're traveling in a direct line and the enemy is in that path, they'll both hit him.
Yeah, he has to make a dexterity save. It's not just an automatic hit still, but he will take a D4.
He takes a D4. Now, is it plus intelligence?
I don't
It
remember.
so in this one, it shows intelligence, but I believe we talked about it's supposed to be intelligence, wisdom, or charisma.
And you choose.
And so like mine, for
Okay, yeah.
instance, I went with wisdom because I thought street smarts
Okay.
Mhm.
kind of made
So it's
more
kind
sense
of
for the
like it's kind of your spell casting modifier essentially.
Yeah, so basically you are doing 2d4 damage in one turn in
Mhm.
addition to your regular weapon
But
attack.
it took you a round
but-
to set it up.
Yeah, but so basically if you would have just done your offhand attack, you would have also done a d4 damage,
And
2d4 over 2 turns.
if you've watched any of the episodes too, when I throw it out too, a lot of times the battlefield changes, so you can set
Mhm.
something up and they'll move, and then that
Yep.
setup doesn't actually do anything. So,
So you might need to move in order to
Exactly.
get them in line again.
Yeah.
But if you can hit multiple creatures in one line,
Yeah.
great.
helpful,
If you can set it up, and there are other things that you can do with your blades. I also I gave kind of a pool of performance points that are sort of like key points, only I think superior because they're not key points.
So never mind.
And you do get them every short rest, and I think you can also regain 1 point as a bonus action. I gave that in there just
but
in
only
case.
once per
Mhm.
long
And that was
rest.
and that was
performance,
based
yeah.
on, and this is your next tip, that was based on the psychic fighter.
The Psy Warrior.
Yeah, the Psy Warrior.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to kind of take elements from these new Tasha's classes and throw them in there, and that's where the 2 times your proficiency bonus comes in too. I think is from the Psy Warrior, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I did that was because, and the tip is like take inspiration from the other ones that are already balanced or mostly balanced,
Sure.
because it makes for an easier time for you in the
because
long
they've gone through a much wider net of
Yeah.
play testing, and
In theory. Tell us what you can do. What are some of the things you can do with these performance points that you get?
Sure. I don't know, Preston, do you want to go over a few things that you can do?
sure.
So I'm not
This
just
is
the
like,
one
I don't
talking.
know.
It is your it is your character.
Yes. So with those performance points, some of the things that I've been experimenting with and kind of running with as well is there's the honed edge blades and there's the bladed defense. So essentially, when I throw those out, instead of just throwing out just a regular blade, I can choose to use some of those performance points to basically not really issue a command, but basically say, okay, this blade, I'm going to have a trigger. It's like a trap, right? So when I throw it out, if any of my companions are hit within 5 feet of that particular blade, it'll basically react to being attacked and fly out and block or reduce that damage. I think
So
it's
that's the
just
bladed
reduce-
It
defense.
reduces the damage.
That's
Yep.
bladed defense.
So that works like the interception fighting
kinda
style a little
intercept.
bit, but
Yep,
it's
it's a little bit
It's a
weaker.
D4.
Yeah,
But
it's
you
just a
could have
D4, so
multiple
it just
too.
reduces the damage by D4.
Okay.
You roll it, so it could be a 1, could be a 4.
Technically, if I was that might be something to look at if it becomes too much of like I use 3 blades to deflect 3d4.
Yeah.
It might become a reaction. That's not something that I gave as a reaction because I didn't want to
Right.
use your reaction on that. So it is usable multiple times, but at the same time, it's only usable once per round per
and
blade.
as I've found so far, whenever I did throw them out and with the intent of being like, hey, I want to use 1 or 2 of these blades on this person, most of the time people moved and the battle it didn't really do anything.
So you have to choose then, like before you
Yes.
or while you're throwing them out as
It's
part of
not
that
like-
bonus action to throw out, you spend a performance point and say, you guys are defensive blades.
Exactly.
Essentially.
When I throw it out, I can't just be like, hey, you over there, you're a defensive blade now.
Right.
It has to be when I throw it out and when I prepare it. And that's something you have to track, so just keep, for me, I just have like a little list. I say, defensive blades, and then I've named each of my blades so I know which ones they are. So when they are out and when I retrieve them back, I can tell which ones they are.
It's Victoria, Vicky Jr.
Wait, these are just the Charlie's Angels.
Vicky's Angels.
Perfect. The other one,
that's what I'm going to be calling them from now on. Thank you, Alan.
hey, when I
You're
get
welcome.
to later levels and I can like brandish them like wings, sure. So then the other one there is honed edge blades, and essentially what this does is it's kind of like you take that instead of spending the performance points to like prepare it and throw it out, you basically say, hey, I'm going to attack with this blade.
Yeah, so you infuse the bonded
Multiples,
blades, basically the same number as your proficiency bonus.
So I can say 1 or 2 of them. I'm going to infuse these so that the next time that these hit within 10 minutes, they'll do extra damage. on.
They actually
on
do.
that.
They get a bonus on the attack roll,
Right.
on the damage roll.
So
it's,
Not
it's like a
individual, I'm
bless.
sorry, attack
Yeah.
roll.
So it's an extra
it's like-
D4 to hit.
So you're blessing yourself basically.
Yeah, it's like the
with a
bless
performance
spell,
point.
just for those
blades.
blades that you've
That's-
blessed.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
pretty nice.
So
Mhm.
of course, what I'm doing right now is thinking, okay, so I take 2 levels of fighter. I pick up for my fighting style. I want the thrown weapon fighting style, which is going to give me
Mhm.
+2 damage to my thrown weapons, and then maybe even the dueling fighting style, which lets me add another 2 points of damage when I attack with a weapon that I'm holding in one hand.
And then
So now I have
action
a +4
surge.
to damage, and if I'm getting +1d4 to hit and +d4 to damage, now those 1d4 weak daggers are pretty good weapons.
Or darts, or what was the other ones? I think just
It was
axes.
dagger, darts, or throwing knives.
Can
I think,
you-
or hand axes? Maybe.
Can you use a dart for any of these? They don't have to be daggers.
So specifically, I said that there were specific weapons that knife dancers could use. Most use knives or daggers. Some have been known to use darts, and some have been known to use. I think it was like throwing axes that we specifically talked about as well.
What about a boomerang?
In that
A boomerang?
Case, I have
Oh
an
my
even
gosh!
better idea.
A boomerang dancer.
Wait, so it's just soccer.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you can do with your performance points is you can cast spells with them.
Yep.
And basically it's whatever level the spell is how many performance points it costs you.
Mhm.
And there are specific spells that you get at certain levels. Like at 3rd level, you get Ensnaring Strike, Hail of Thorns, Zephyr Strike, Jump, Long Strider, and Ice Knife. And then notably, like that sounds really powerful because it's like, oh, it's only 1 performance point to cast, Ensnaring Strike. And at 10th level, that would be 10 times that I could cast Ensnaring Strike or Zephyr
And
Strike
as
or
noted,
Ice Knife, which apparently is a really good spell.
It still follows spell
If
casting
you can
and
upcast
whatever
it,
actions.
Templating off of Arcane Trickster a bit in a way.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I templated off the Arcane Trickster for these like spell levels to determine what level of spells they could get. But more importantly, what I did is I made it so that you can't use a spell twice between short rests. So you get like, because normally when you get spells for a subclass like that are always prepared, you get like 2 or 3 at the most. And this is 5 different spells at first level, right when you hit the subclass, but you can only use them once per short rest. The idea behind that was, and the justification was that a knife dancer, and maybe I have to put this in here as flavor, the knife dancer never uses the same move twice for a performance, right? They don't like to just cast the same thing over and over again. They like to constantly be weaving that story of blade dancing and whatnot. So
Right. So they're sort of almost like warlock spell slots in a way or something, where you get to use them once per short rest, and then they do refresh on a short rest, or at least your performance points refresh on a short rest. So you could potentially do it again on your next short rest. But okay, that makes sense, I think.
And then as far as they go,
I was just going to say, sorry, the spell list is fairly limited. It's all kind of blade-based stuff.
Thematic, yep.
There's a couple in there that aren't, like Cordon of Arrows. I made it so that it's usable with daggers or darts because I like the idea. And then Melf's Minute Meteors is another spell that
it's just shooting
gets put in there.
blades instead of
it's shooting blades instead of meteors.
Okay.
And I do mention in there, I think that they are like all blade based rather than the usual kind of spell based. And then notably, for any 4th or 5th level spells that you can cast, you can't cast them more than once per long rest. So you have an even bigger limitation on those in order to prevent like every fight between short rests, I can cast Still Wind Strike, and deal a bunch of damage to start the fight kind of thing.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. Well, what else do we get?
So the next thing that we get is at 9th level, and this was something that Preston came to me and asked me to include for him because he really liked the concept of it. And it's basically he wanted Shadow Step. He wanted
just be able to be like Minato.
You
or
wanted
Minato
Shadow
or
Step with
Naruto.
damage.
I just want to be able to teleport to my blade cool and be like, hey, I want to go over there.
Yeah. And so I gave at 9th level, basically this would be higher than normally a monk would get that spell, but you also get the added benefit of being able to do a damage with it or an attack with it. I think Shadow Step you get to attack with it, don't you?
No, but it's just a bonus action to cast.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so this is a bonus action. You get to teleport to one of your blades within 40 feet of you. So again, you have to set it up, or you have to just let one of your blades that you attack with like sit there for a moment, and then on your next turn you can teleport to it. And then you can actually either have yourself attack the creature within 5 feet of the new space that you teleport to, or you can switch places with a blade and have that blade attack a creature that is within 5 feet of the space you left behind. Nice. So it's sort of either a getaway or a closing
move to. Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like instead of taking the disengage action or something else, it's just taking more
bamf to them.
Resources to bamf.
Yeah. Okay. And then at 13th level, I gave a few more additional performance points options, letting you basically do like I call it Dancer's Rebuke, but it's basically a hellish rebuke for an attack against you. And I think that one is a reaction. Yeah, you can use your reaction.
Yeah.
And then you've got your Dancer's Defense, which basically gives you dodge as a bonus action with a little bit extra, but again, very limited because you are using.
I think it is worth noting on the Dancer's Rebuke that there is a spell save. Isn't there on there? There's a deck save.
Deck save. There is a deck save.
A deck save on it. So it's not an automatic hit. What's important is that it is your reaction, so you can't stack Hellish Rebuke and this.
Yeah. Yep.
As a tiefling.
Because that would be insane. and then I also added in a little bit the Dancer's Guile ability that I added in gives you advantage on a performance, deception, intimidation, or persuasion check if you use the performance points. I felt there was a lot of combat stuff in here, and I needed a little bit of extra utility for the character because I think one of the things that I think I could do more. One of the things that you have to keep in mind when you're homebrewing a class is not everything should be about combat. I know as optimizers and as combat aficionados like us, it is really easy to be like, yeah, let's do all combat abilities because that would be cool. Get rid of that fluff and filler that says I get advantage on athletics checks as a champion. Who cares about that? I just want the 18 to crit kind of thing. I did want to make this so that I wouldn't have the player feel useless within the world in any given situation.
Right.
Yeah, and then beyond that, I think taking all that RP stuff and then never getting the opportunity, having the bard or the barbarian go rushing in before you can get your assassination damage.
Yeah, that's never happened to me before, ever.
And I definitely wanted to make a rogue class that didn't feel so edgy.
Edgy.
Like emo? you can do edge with this class. You can be that blade dancer with that cloak of knives because that's a really cool image. But at the same time, I also wanted it to make it a little bit performer-esque, a little bit bard-esque because I know that's what Preston likes to play too. And again, making the homebrew class, if you're doing it specifically for a player, working with that player to kind of make it fit their style is going to make a better homebrew and a more fun experience for both of you because the player's not being like, well, this isn't everything that I wanted. It's actually completely opposite. So
I can see Preston's hand in here, and he was channeling his best Talon from League of Legends. For those who play League of Legends,
Aurelia.
That's what this character is very much like. Or
Yondu,
Aurelia actually too.
Yondu
I see some there.
From Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep, a little bit of Yondu in there for
Minato
sure.
from Naruto.
And then at 17th level, I guess one last thing that you can do with your performance points at 13th level is you can create kind of an AoE sonorous tone. Again, you have to set up a blade on one turn and then strike it with another blade on the next, but it allows you to do sort of a pick and choose deafen. And I debated whether or not to be all creatures or creatures you choose for a little bit, but it really came down to the idea that Victor or whoever this knife dancer would be could say, cover your ears right as he launches it, and the party know instinctively to cover their ears.
By 13th level, hopefully we've, we're a well-oiled
or
unit.
Depending on how many times Sarah says Vicky.
Yeah,
he might say, everybody but Vicky, close yours.
I'm deafened. Just me.
And then at 17th level, I wanted to convey the idea that the amount of magic and the amount of time that you've spent with your bonded weapons can create this bond and almost create a pseudo intelligent weapon, because I do like the idea of intelligent weapons as well and having them be a mobile part of the battlefield. So I gave the ability for your prime weapon, is what I'm calling it, to be a +2 weapon, deal a d8 magic damage instead of its normal. And I believe at level 6, all of your damage with your bonded weapons is magical. If we go back to the 3rd level one, it tells you that.
Yeah, at level 6, I think it was.
And then basically I gave the ability for you to throw out your prime weapon and have it become almost like a holy weapon, or not holy weapon.
Spiritual weapon.
Yeah.
Spirit.
So basically it can move around the battlefield each turn. You can command it. It can like deal damage as it's moving around. It can create kind of this buffer zone where people don't want to step into it.
It can create
and it can
swarm.
it can pick up other daggers along the way for extra damage, which I really thought was cool. And then I also wanted to do something that doesn't get done very often, and that's that letting the player have something to do while they're unconscious. So at level 17, even if you're unconscious, your prime weapon will continue to dance around the battlefield. If it is, I think it's...
Is that until you die, or...
if you're incapacitated at the start of your turn, your blade may immediately move 20 feet in a straight line as if it were under the effect of the swarm steel. So it doesn't matter if it's under that effect to begin with, it will do that until, of course, you're dead. At which point,
or you regain consciousness, I suppose, right?
Either way.
And
Okay.
it's that whole like bonding with the essence, or like the spirit of that to go. All right, take a drink. It's like the little beads from
Shadesmar.
Shadesmar, thank you.
From Shadesmar, yeah. It's basically like the soul of the thing in your...
And the other thing that I wanted to kind of convey with this idea that you can control this weapon while you're unconscious and basically it's becoming more and more intelligent is maybe someday the next party down the line finds your blade and it's infused with your soul, or at least your mannerisms, and it becomes the intelligent weapon for the next campaign.
A shard of your soul of something.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like setting things up for the future if you're into that sort of thing as a DM. Now, one more thing to note about that level 17 ability, and this is a way late addition when most classes get this way earlier on, but you'll get the ability to cast spells from your prime weapon, like as if it were like your familiar as well. So that again, that's way late compared to most other classes get it, but it is a nice little bump in power.
Well, okay. I think that was a pretty good overview. What other tips or tricks or advice would you, Cory, or any of you guys give to someone who was looking to homebrew something, particularly a class or a subclass that we maybe haven't gone over? We kind of have been doing some nice little tips and things along the way, but I don't know if there's any that we haven't got to yet.
One thing that I would say, just because I've been thinking about it forever, is don't be afraid to cut things. And I'm very bad at this normally, because I'll make like a trading card deck and I won't want to cut my favorite cards because I think they're the coolest and everything, and it feels bad to cut them, or something that's thematically appropriate, right? Like there were a couple spells like there's a 9th level spell from Icewind Dale that just came out that does like 4d12 damage and then pierces through like force and everything.
Yeah, it's Blade of Disaster.
Yeah, Blade of Disaster would have worked really cool with this class.
If you crit, it does 12d12.
Yeah, and Blade Barrier is a 6th level spell that would have worked perfectly. Like it fits within the theme so well, and I had to cut them because I was looking at it. I was like, I can't make this character a really good martial character and a full spellcaster at the same time for a subclass. So I had to limit it to level 5 spells, and I cut out several things that Preston wanted in that spell list as well. And then again, I would just say narrow your scope. I went way broad with this one just because I knew who I was dealing with as far as the subclass goes. But it is one of those things where it's like if you go too broad and throw too much in there, your player is going to have way too many options and not know what half of them do because they can't read through all of the different cool stuff that you gave them. And then B, they're not going to be able to do that anyway because there's not enough time to be able to utilize all of that.
Yeah. What about balance? I mean, how do you go about trying to, in addition to maybe some things that you've mentioned already, you know, what's the best way to try and balance something other than just kind of looking to what's gone before?
Go on D&D Optimized. Watch all of Colby's videos.
Do the opposite.
And then if it feels broken, it's probably broken.
You just gotta play it. You gotta see
Yeah.
what it does. I mean, you can always look at it and kind of crunch the numbers on what if scenarios, which is fun, and that's that's theory crafting. But sometimes what it looks like on paper is very different from how it plays in the game, because you could be like, oh, this does 66 DPR, but then you're like, well, but I gotta set this up and I gotta do this, and then it takes 3 rounds, so like you spread the damage over the 3 rounds, and it's like, okay, that's only whatever.
Or like
so that's
on
kinda
paper,
average.
being able to drag those blades back, like that's a ton of damage, but in reality, fights are messy and you throw things out and people move.
And we didn't do any play testing. I'll put that caveat out there because I specifically
we're currently play testing it.
We are play testing it.
We're in the middle of it.
And I set that up at the beginning, and I let Preston know. I'm like, things may change depending on how powerful you are. If you're super powerful in the early game, I may tone it back, but as things go on, you may not become powerful. And there are some subclasses in D&D that once you hit level 3, you're like uber powerful until like level 12, and then you kind of drop off,
fall off
the radar, and the wizard takes over again, or whatever. So definitely, if you want to introduce a subclass as a fully fleshed out, like here you go, play it, plug and play, whatever, make sure that you play test it extensively, because it could at every level to be able to get all the kinks out of there. As far as balance goes, if something feels really powerful without any sort of action, give it an action type. If it's powerful as a bonus action, make it an action. If it's powerful thing to be able to use outside your turn, give it a reaction cost.
Yeah.
Because something like that, that creates options for your players, and it doesn't really limit them in the way that you think it does. Because for me, like saying like, oh, I only get 1 reaction a turn, kind of it's terrible, because there's like 3 different reactions I want to take, but really there's just 3 different options for the reaction that I get to take.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess I would say too, get feedback. I mean, don't be afraid to
send it out,
throw it out there to someone whose opinion that you trust and has been playing the game for a long time. Because
sometimes we can make things precious, and like as an artist, I can be very what do you want to call that? This is something that I have to fight with internally, is that when something's so precious to you and you know that something about it is wrong and you're not willing to change it, it's going to be really difficult for you to kind of get that balance. And so be willing to be able to say, you know what, when I drew this face, or when I created this particular part of the class, it's broken. Like it's completely wrong. It's anatomically out of the way. I need to just wipe it off, start over, rip the Band-Aid off and keep moving.
And I specifically sent this to Colby, and I said, break this. And he sent back a lot of notes, and he sent back some really good feedback that I was like, okay, I'm immediately implementing this, because I can see how that would make this broken if I don't limit it in this factor or that factor.
And so, and another tip, I think, for at least as a DM, if you're kind of struggling from where to start, you want to, but you're not really sure where to go. Echoing a little bit what Cory said, but expounding a little, is look at the player. Like limit that scope to what that player is needing at that time, and start from there. Because if you say, okay, well, there's all these options available, you're going to have analysis paralysis most likely, and it's not going to be as beneficial.
And I was just going to say, like, play testing it with multiple people, kind of getting to your point, is maybe a good idea, because one person may play it and be like, and another person may play it and be like, that was amazing, and I made it, I kind of exploited this aspect of the character that this other person missed that made it like super strong or whatever.
Yeah. And it's another thing to play test with only one person being that character and everybody else being on the sidelines for that player's turns, because all of your other players, their enjoyment of the character is just as important. Like it's no fun when one person goes, oh, I do this and this on my turn, and everybody else is just like, cool.
I stab him with my sword.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not having
Your
fun
turn.
anymore because I feel like the other person is doing so much more than I ever
Right.
could.
Right.
I think, and that's something that you also have to balance, especially if you're building a homebrew class just for a single campaign, like just for a single player, a single character. It might seem easy to be like, oh, it's just for this one person. I don't have to balance it, but it's not just for the one person. It's for the entire party.
Right.
Well, and if you're following what D&D, what Wizards of the Coast does with their Unearthed Arcana, it seems like they always give like this really overpowered version of it first, and then they kind of scale back before it comes out, because they go, oh wait, and they kind of pull it back. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have to tweak it as you go.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe I would tend to be the opposite, and maybe make it a little underwhelming.
You'd err on the side of caution.
Right, because then if it's okay, that wasn't that cool, we're gonna actually tweak the damage. But taking away damage from people, I don't know, maybe that just makes me feel bad.
Taking something away feels bad, but at the same time, like,
you got to make sure it's balanced.
You want it to be fun to play and like really cool, or else the person's not going to want to play it, right? And
exactly. So it's like a razor thin edge.
Yeah. So being overpowered at least makes it
edge.
like, oh, I love that character. That was so fun to play. And you're like, great, I'm glad you liked it. You're way OP. Like, we're going to scale this back a little bit, but you're still going to like it. It's still going to be fun. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, cool. Well, I'm sure we went long as usual. I'll try and find ways when I edit to cut stuff. So
thanks for indulging me in this episode.
Don't be afraid.
Guys.
Don't feel bad. Don't feel like your comments were too precious that I can't cut them, so I can get us down under an hour. Anyway, love you guys. You're awesome. Thanks for watching. Tune in to our shows. Please do like and subscribe and comment, and consider joining the channel if you would. It's great for us to support us and help us create more and better content. So anyway, thanks to my DMs as always. You guys are fantastic, and we'll see you tomorrow when we play our next session.
Bye.
Okay, have a good one.